Today we are going to learn about APA citation. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to differentiate between MLA and APA, define APA and discuss its origins and structure, understand the rules that make up APA citation, and complete an APA reference. Why do we have so many different citation styles? Simply put, different disciplines have different needs. Citation styles are uniquely tailored to suit the specific needs of those disciplines. Today, we will be focusing on the citation style used in the behavioral sciences, APA. And to assist us in understanding APA format, we will be comparing it to a citation style you are most likely already familiar with, MLA. MLA is currently on its 8th edition and is used primarily in the humanities. MLA focuses on the versions and the locations of a text. For example, what type of publication the text can be found in and the credibility of that publication. In MLA, who said it is more important than when it was said. MLA caters to authority over recency. This doesn't make recency unimportant, just not as important as authority. APA is currently on its 7th edition and is used in the behavioral and the social sciences. APA focuses on author and recency of information. APA caters to recency and research over authority. APA was created in 1929 by the American Psychological Association. It is used in sociology, education, nursing, criminal justice, anthropology, and psychology. APA's latest edition was published in 2019, where the manual addresses accessibility for people with disabilities for the first time. A typical APA-style research paper fulfills 3 levels of specifications. Think of it like a roadmap. Level 1 states how research must be organized in your paper. This is the roadmap for readers and allows them to navigate the paper with ease. Level 2 specifies the style of the writing. This includes how things are phrased and what language should be utilized or avoided. Level 3 specifies the mechanics, the details of how everything should look on the page. Let's begin with the Level 1 rules of APA, which concern how your paper is organized. In MLA, in the top left-hand corner, you will put your name, your professor's name, your class information, and the date. In APA, you have an entire page dedicated to this information, called the title page. Here you include your paper title, which typically has a general title and then a more specific subtitle, then your name, and lastly, the name of the school that you are currently attending. APA also requires an abstract, but students often don't have to write one in their classes. Please check with your professor to see if they are requiring an abstract for your research paper. Research paper and APA follow what is known as the IMRAD format, which is a mnemonic device. To start with, we have the introduction, which is where you introduce your research question and hypothesis and explain why your research is important. You also identify what is called the gap statement and also the contribution statement. The gap statement is where you explain a gap in the current research, something that has not yet been addressed. The contribution statement concerns how you intend to fill that gap. Also in the introduction is the literature review, where you will summarize and synthesize the current research on your topic, providing context for the research you have done. Next, we have the methods section, which is vital because this is where you will explain exactly what you did to get your data. The golden standard for a methods section is that it should allow others to replicate your study. Information found in the methods section includes the study site, the participants, the methods of how data was collected, and how the data was analyzed. Next, we have the results section, which is where you explain what the data collection produced. This is where you are most likely to encounter tables, graphs, charts, and lists. One of the difficult parts of an IMRAD research paper is separating what belongs in the results and what belongs in the discussion. Due to this, some authors will combine the results and the discussion sections. The results should only contain the results of your findings. If you begin to interpret what your data means, you should put that writing in your discussion. The analysis or discussion section is the meat and potatoes of your research paper. Here, you discuss what your findings mean, particularly in the context of the larger academic conversation. Here, you will most likely write about the implications of your findings, make recommendations or calls to action, and discuss the limitations of your study. Limitations may include a low number of participants, lack of diversity, or not having enough time in which to gather your research. In your conclusion, you need to recap your main findings and reiterate what your findings mean. In APA, your works cited page is called a references page. Now let's look at the Level 2 rules of APA, which specify the style of writing, which includes how things are phrased and what language should be utilized or avoided. First, do not use slang unless you are quoting someone verbatim. No pop culture references. No humor. Your writing should be clear and formal. Your word and phrase choices should reduce bias. We will go over this more in a moment. Use technical terms instead of layman's terms. And lastly, be direct. Let's review 3 examples of how APA encourages a reduction in biased language from the APA Style website. We will begin with language surrounding age. The APA guidelines state that you should show aging as a normal part of the human experience, separate from disease and disorder. Examples of acceptable language include older adults and adults aged 65 and older. Examples of problematic language would be senior citizen and the elderly. Next, let's look at language surrounding disability. The APA guidelines state that you should use person-first or identity-first language according to the preferences of the person or group you are discussing. Avoid euphemistic and fatalistic language. Examples of acceptable language include disabled person or person with a disability, autistic person, blind person, deaf or hard of hearing person, wheelchair user, and person with Down syndrome. Examples of problematic language would be special needs, wheelchair bound, stroke victim, and hearing impaired person. Lastly, we'll look at what language surrounding socioeconomic status. The APA guidelines state that you should emphasize what people have and not what they lack. Examples of acceptable language includes people experiencing homelessness or people whose income is, and then define the income level. Examples of problematic language would be the homeless and the poor. Let's now look at the Level 3 rules of APA, which specifies mechanics. First, you should use double spacing, which is similar to MLA. Next, you should use numerals for numbers 10 and above, but spell out numbers 9 and below. You should left align all tables and figures and use footnotes sparingly. Next, there are headers. There are specific rules for headers. Let's look at an example from Purdue Owl's website. Level 1 headers are centered and in bold. Level 2 headers are flush left and in bold. Flush left means that they are not indented. Level 3 are flush left, bold, and italicized. Number 4 headers are indented and bold. Number 5 are indented, bold, and italicized. Next, in-text citation rules. You always include the year in a study that was published directly after the author or the author's names. Regarding page numbers, you put a P dot and then the number, unlike MLA where you only put the number of the page you are citing from. Let's do a little exercise here and cite something. The source we are going to cite will be from a landmark piece called Grammar, Grammars, and the Teaching of Grammar by Patrick Hartwell, published in 1985. It was published in the Journal of College English, and it was volume 47, number 2. quickly here, what is volume and number? What do they mean? Periodicals are typically published and referenced by volume and issue number. Volume typically refers to the number of years the publication has been circulated, and the issue refers to how many times that periodical has been published during that year. All right, how should we start off our APA reference? Let's start with the surname, Hartwell. What goes after the surname? The author's first initial and their middle initial if it is included. This helps avoid bias against women in research by ensuring that the first name isn't visible except as an initial. What do you think is next? The year. Remember, as we just mentioned, the year is always tied to the author's last name. This is true even in the references. What comes next, do you think? The name of the article. Note here that the title only has the first word capitalized. In APA, the first word of the title and then of the subtitle are capitalized. All other words are lowercase. What goes after the name of the article, do you think? The journal title. This is in italics and is followed by a comma, not a period. What do you think is next? The volume and the issue number. Note that volume is in italics, followed by the number in parentheses. You do not include the shorthand of volume and number in here like you would in MLA. If there is no number, then only include the volume in italics. What goes after the volume and issue, do you think? The pages. Scholarly articles are published in issues with multiple other articles, so you must include which pages this particular article takes up in that issue. Do not include the PP dot, unlike in MLA. Only include the page numbers. There is one more thing that is included in an APA citation for a scholarly article. We haven't mentioned it yet. It's called the DOI. The DOI is like a web URL, except that it is a stable link address that is safer from link rot. The way to find the DOI is to go into your library database and pull up the article and ask it to cite it for you. That is the easiest way to find it. The citation might not be up to date, but the DOI should be in there. Now let's look at in-text citations for APA. If you are quoting Hartwell, what would the APA in-text citation look like? Similar to MLA, you do include the author's surname. What else? Don't forget that earlier we mentioned that the year an article is published is glued to the author's surname. So next, you put in the year. Also similar to MLA, you include the page number. However, there is one small difference. You put a P dot instead of just the number. If you are referencing more than one page, you would put PP dot. So for example, here it's page 106. But if you had page 106 through 7, it would be PP dot 106-07. Now let's review this really quick. When do you include the year for an in-text citation? Every time, attached directly after the author or author's last name. Let's wrap up here really quickly. Some helpful reminders. Don't forget to write formally, concisely, and clearly when using APA. Follow Purdue OWL's instructions exactly. That means quotation marks, italics, and whether they're using a comma or a period. Reference the APA Student Paper Setup Guide, which will be made available to you. The year of publication is always latched on or glued to the author's surname. And lastly, feel free to take this APA test to double-check your knowledge. That concludes the presentation on APA format. Thank you for watching and have an excellent rest of your day.